This video was brought to you by my patrons. Thanks! Also, if you notice the audio quality of the voiceover changing throughout the video, it's because my microphone died more than halfway through the editing process, and if you can hear the difference and it's weird, I'm sorry. I turned 30 at the beginning of last year. A strange yet unremarkable achievement. Something Bo Burnham aptly summarized in his song 30 from his Netflix special Inside. God damn it! And as I get older, I find I have a somewhat contentious relationship with my childhood. While I'm no stranger to those wisps of nostalgia that come with the changing of the seasons, I can never find it in myself to uncategorically romanticize my childhood. So many parts of it were painful in ways I don't want to revisit. And yet there was that sense of joy, of wonder, of magic, in everything. The world was still new to me, and that made exploring it an adventure. Anyways, let's talk about Rise of the Guardians. Our story starts in darkness, and then light. A boy rises out of the waters of a frozen lake to discover he possesses the powers of an elemental, the power of winter. We watch as he uncovers his abilities with a breathless joy, and then he flies into the nearest town, not knowing who he is or where he is, but still full of excitement. And then this happens. The voiceover tells us this boy's name is Jack Frost.
How do I know that? The moon told me so. But that was all he ever told me. And that was a long, long time ago.
That is the opening of the film. What follows are the exciting adventures of Jack Frost teaming up with myths of legend and folklore to fight the boogeyman Pitch Black. A simple but fun premise. It's basically Fairy Tale Avengers, although the film was in production long before the release of that particular film. But superheroes were definitely in the minds of the creatives as this film developed. Also, I have to state this movie gives me Kingdom Hearts vibes in the best way. So with that, let's do the rundown. The film was directed by Peter Ramsey, his directorial debut on a feature film, by the way. After this, he would go on to co-direct the instant classic Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse in 2018 with Bob Persichetti and Rodney Rothman. The screenplay was written by David Lindsay-Abaire, who has had a truly baffling career. He adapted his stage play The Rabbit Hole for screen. He also wrote the book for the Shrek musical, and wrote screenplays for films like Robots, Inkheart, Oz the Great and Powerful, and a Poltergeist movie. The film was executive produced by Guillermo del Toro. Hey, we know that guy! Del Toro had notable input on a lot of story points when the film had to be restructured, as Peter Ramsey put it. Also, according to Ramsey, Del Toro was very insistent that Jack Frost be positively dreamy.
Jack and Tooth having their little semi-flirtation. Guillermo del Toro was always like, "Come on, we got to give them a love story. Jack's got to be a heartthrob. I urge you."
Listen, bless that man. They succeeded. Side note, I just love how this detail is constantly brought up in anything related to this movie. The art book describes him as a sensitive guy who verges on being a bit of a hunk. Just incredible. Also working as executive producer was William Joyce, the author of the Guardians of Childhood books and the originator of this story's concept. He's had a pretty interesting career. He created and worked on the Disney series Roly Poly Oly and produced the 2005 film Robots and the 2007 Disney film Meet the Robinsons. He also won an Oscar for his short film The Fantastic Flying Books of Mr. Morris Lesmore in 2011. We're going to talk more about him later, but it's important to know he was actually set to co-direct the Guardians movie initially, but stepped back from the project after his daughter Mary Catherine died of a brain tumor at age 18. The film is dedicated to her, and Joyce remained creatively involved as an executive producer. Roger Deakins worked as a visual consultant on the film after collaborating on another recent DreamWorks film, How to Train Your Dragon, and so consequently, this film is gorgeous to look at. The score was composed by Alexandre Desplat, who might be best known for his collaborations with Wes Anderson. He did the scores for Fantastic Mr. Fox, Moonrise Kingdom, and Grand Budapest Hotel, as well as the scores for the last 2 Harry Potter films. Now, onto the cast for the movie. Our main protagonist, Jack Frost, is voiced by Chris Pine, giving one of my favorite performances of his entire career.
It's a snow day!
The character of Jack Frost is a bit of a punk.
Am I on the naughty list?
He's careless and reckless. He's got a Peter Pan sort of quality, and a sadness that is centuries old. Then we have Nicholas St. North, our Santa Claus character, voiced by... Look, there's no way around this. As I'm writing this script, we still don't entirely know all the details surrounding the death of up-and-coming cinematographer Helena Hutchins, whose work on films like Darling and Arch Enemy were testaments to her talent, and her death is a tragedy. She was fatally shot by Alec Baldwin when a prop gun misfired on the set of the western he was starring in called Rust. And while voicing North might be some of the best work of Baldwin's career, authorities are still untangling the circumstances of Hutchinson's death, and I don't really want to celebrate this man who, to one degree or another, ended a human life. And I am not going to mention Alec Baldwin's name again in this video. The character of Nicholas St. North is the moving definition of bombast. A Cossack-inspired Santa Claus with naughty and nice tattoos and a penchant for swearing in Russian composers.
Rimsky-Korsakov, Shostakovich.
Then there's our Tooth Fairy, aka Toothiana, voiced by Isla Fisher.
Have you ever seen a more adorable lateral incisor in all of your life? Look how she flossed!
She's high energy and high enthusiasm, and her and Jack are definitely into each other. We've got E. Aster Bunnymund. E. Aster... His name's Easter Bunny, good lord, sometimes I think Bill Joyce is a menace. Well, he's voiced by Hugh Jackman, and his main character traits are Australian.
Looks like you're a bit of a Brumby, hey mate?
And he's a bit of a stubborn jerk at times, but also he's pretty cool.
You might want to duck.
The Sandman, aka Sandy, is not voiced, but he is adorable and I love him.
That's not really helping, but thanks, little man.
And then we've got our bad guy, Pitch Black, voiced with a playfully velvet menace by Jude Law. I'll talk about Pitch more later, but he is an excellent villain.
Ooh.
Then there's the kids, starting with Jamie Bennett, voiced by Dakota Goyo. Fun fact, Hugh Jackman actually recommended him for the role after they worked together on Real Steel. And there's a whole bunch of other kids, but I want to shout out Dominique Grund as Cupcake.
I will.
And Georgie Grieve as Jamie's little sister, Sophie.
Bunny, hop, hop, hop.
So with that, let's all take a deep breath and dive into the books. So, before we dig into the Guardians of Childhood, a few disclaimers. Number 1, these books were written for children aged 7 to 11 years old, and the picture books are literal picture books for children. So, while I will concede the art is beautiful and the writing style is charming, these books weren't meant to be read by 30-year-olds. If you like the Guardians of Childhood books, or you have a fond nostalgia for them, that's really valid. I did not experience these books in the way they were meant to be experienced. If I had read these books when I was 7, I might have liked them. But I read them as an entire adult woman, and I'm going to make a lot of jokes about these books because I think they're kind of bananas. Number 2, William Joyce seems like a well-intentioned person whose bad writing choices stem from ignorance rather than malice. I know in real life the man has dealt with a lot of personal tragedy, and that really sucks. But I'm going to say a bunch of not nice things about his writing choices, so I'll say something nice first, which is he's an incredibly talented artist. I love his drawings. I particularly love his penchant for drawing puppies with jetpacks. It's a great impulse. I hope he keeps it up. Okay, so Remember when I said The Rise of the Guardians gave me Kingdom Hearts vibes? Well, it turns out that was nothing compared to the Guardians of Childhood, which is truly working on the level of, 13 Xehanorts and Donald Duck being the most powerful wizard in history. So I'm going to summarize what I consider to be the highlights as quickly as possible because I read all of these books and I think they're hilarious. Okay, so first off, we've got Manny, the Man in the Moon, also just called Mims sometimes. In the books, our boy Bill inexplicably decided to just do the Romanoffs with him and his people. No, seriously, this is full-on Anastasia. The Man in the Moon is the son of Tsar and Tsarina Luninoff, who got killed by Pitch, who is their, I don't know, vizier or knight or something. Baby Luninoff is saved by Jack Frost, who at this point is called Nightlight. He stabs Pitch with a moon dagger, and the pair are trapped together in some hellish purgatory for centuries, leaving the Man in the Moon to grow up alone and watch over Earth. Oh, and Pitch, the vizier guy, knight of the Luninoffs? Well, he gets tempted by the nightmares and fearlings who torment him with the voice of his dead daughter! And then when he lets them out of their cages, they consume his soul and possess his body, and then he goes and kills the Tsar of Russia, the Moon. Then, in the next book, we meet North, who will later be Santa Claus. He was raised by Cossacks, and he's a pirate and a thief. He goes to the town of Santofklassen, where he meets Father Time, who is a wizard from Atlantis, who teaches him magic and has an adopted daughter named Catherine, who will later be Mother Goose. Also, all of his friends got turned into statues, and he got over that real quick. And in later books, he turned them all into his helper elves, because that isn't horrifying. In the next book, we meet E. Aster Bunnymund. This interdimensional time-traveling rabbit, also called a puka, is a stuffy motherfucker who just loves anything egg-shaped. And also, the Earth used to be shaped like an egg, and Bunny made it round so it didn't topple into the sun or something. Oh, and he has psychic powers to know everybody's favorite kind of chocolate, but he says chocolate is bad for pukas and it makes him illogical. And in case you're wondering, yes, he does eventually get lost in that chocolate sauce and goes apeshit. And by apeshit, I mean he grows 3 times his size and gets swole. Also, one time he ate some chocolate and grew like 10 extra arms because I'm in hell. In book 3, we meet Toothiana, who I will get to in a bit. But for comedy purposes, I need you to know that Toothiana can manifest 100 tiny tooth fairies from her body, like Dracula turning into a cloud of bats or something. Dear God, why? Oh, and then Pitch's daughter isn't dead, and she's Mother Nature, apparently. Then, in book 4, we meet, dear God, Sanderson Man Snoozy, aka Sandy the Sandman William Joyce, go to fantasy jail! I can't with these names, I'm sorry. I will say Sandy's backstory is actually kind of cool. He was a star captain back in the day who piloted shooting stars and fought dream pirates. Although he does introduce himself to the gang by levitating everybody into the air and then knocking them out, which is a bit wild. Oh, and at one point, Bunny and Tooth debate who was more of an eldritch creation when Tooth manifests 10,000 tooth fairies from her body, and Bunny grows 12 arms. After this, Bunny calculates how much chocolate he would need to grow 10,000 arms! At the end of the book, Jack saves Catherine, aka Mother Goose, with a magic kiss, which is, later called the Everlasting Lip Touch. Thanks, I hate it. Oh, and did you know Jack has knives made from human tears? Look, all jokes aside, I've enjoyed my fair share of Kidlit, but I found Joyce's writing style was not my cup of tea. I do think his illustrations are lush and detailed, and I can see the influence his art had on the visual style of the film. But on a story level, I found his writing to be kind of bizarre. What's unclear to me is how much of that source material the production team even had while working on the film. Peter Ramsey and co. started developing the Rise of the Guardians film somewhere around 2008-2009 when Joyce optioned the concept to DreamWorks. He didn't publish the first books in the series until 2011, and the last book wasn't published until 2018. So while I imagine he gave them a lot of his basic concepts and ideas, like I imagine he probably gave the team whatever outline he had delivered to his publishers when he pitched the series to them, and he clearly worked with the production team to some degree, but I don't know how much of this stuff they had going in. Like, Jack's secret adopted family and a pack of friendly werewolves from Book 5 may not have really been on anybody's minds while they were breaking down the screenplay. And you know how I didn't really mention Tooth that much while describing the books? Well, let's see, there's a Maharaja that was turned into a monkey and a ship made from human teeth. Good God! So let's strap in for a trip to the land of Punjam Hy Loo to talk about some messy stuff. So I mostly didn't get into the storyline of Toothiana in the books because it gets messy. Specifically, it leans into a concept that Edward Zahed, professor of literature at Columbia University, defined as Orientalism in his 1978 book of the same name. According to Zahed, Orientalism is how the West conceptualizes the East, formerly referred to as the Orient by Westerners. These depictions in art, literature, and so on essentialize and exaggerate the differences of the East with a presumption of Western superiority. It is a prejudiced view of quote-unquote the East by outsiders and was shaped by the European imperialism of the 18th and 19th century. As Rudyard Kipling once wrote in his poem, The Ballad of East and West, East is East and West is West, and never the twain shall meet. Orientalism in practice has changed somewhat over the centuries. It's been used to demonize, fetishize, and essentialize whole swaths of Eastern cultures. For recent examples, go watch The Isle of Dogs or The Darjeeling Limited by Wes Anderson. Or better yet, go watch Broe Deschanel's video on those movies. But curiously, William Joyce's Guardians of Childhood series leans a lot more into, let's call it, classic Orientalism? While Punjam is a real town in India, Hy Loo is gibberish as far as I can tell, but the whole tale of the Maharaja breaking into Punjam Hy Loo to kill a flying elephant only to get turned into a monkey by the Sisters of Flight is, well, let's say it would fit in right next to Rudyard Kipling's Jungle Book or Frances Hodgson Burnett's A Little Princess, or even Lewis Carroll's hookah-smoking caterpillar in Alice in Wonderland. In fact, I think Punjam Hy Loo would fit quite comfortably next to C.S. Lewis's The Horse and His Boy, the third in the Chronicles of Narnia series, which tells us a lot about the Calormene Empire. The people of this land, the Calormenes, are dark-skinned with the men mostly bearded. They wear flowing robes, turbans, and wooden shoes with an upturned point at the toe. And their preferred weapon is the Calormene scimitar. In Perry Nodelman's 1992 article for the Children's Literature Association Quarterly, titled The Other, Orientalism, Colonialism, and Children's Literature, he posits that the commonality of Orientalist tendencies in children's literature might come from a Western view of superiority, viewing the East as inherently lesser and childlike on some level. And that might be part of it, but I think Nora Awad Shafi and Faiza Al-Johani might have gotten closer in their 2019 article for the Arab World English Journal titled Orientalism in Children's Literature, Representations of Egyptian and Jordanian Families in Elsa Marston's Stories. They state that children's literature in the 19th century was a form of colonial discourse, and children's literature of the Golden Age featured the adventures of the child character to reflect the colonial expansion and the discovery of the unknown. Basically, children's literature was a way to intentionally or unintentionally pass on colonialist ideas to the next generation. But then there's also the fantasy element, and boy oh boy do fantasy and science fiction writers love to pull from this concept of the East. Whether it's the Calormene Empire or Frank Herbert's Dune with its Muslim-coded Fremen, watch this great video by YouTuber Tazzy Faye for more info on that. I'll have it linked in the description. But anyways, it's a thing, writers do it all the time. Author and academic Brian Attebery suggested in his book Stories About Stories, Fantasy and the Remaking of Myth that it's tempting for authors to look further than Celtic, Arthurian, or Eddic myths for inspiration, if only for the sake of originality as well as the desire for new sensations. Like jaded tourists tired of trips to Paris or diners seeking new and exotic tastes, readers wanted to savor more varieties of myth. If Western-style fire-breathing dragons began to seem too predictable, there were those wise and watery Eastern dragons. If wizards all began to sound like Gandalf and Merlin, they could be replaced by tribal shamans. Local nature spirits, such as the Greek Kalikanzaroi, could do duty as elf substitutes. So long as the central character functioned as a stand-in for the reader, the rest of the dramatis personae could be recast and the sets replaced with more exotic backdrops. These might all be factors that contributed to William Joyce's particular brand of yikes. I spoke to a couple folk of East, Southeast, and South Asian descent, mostly because while parts of Tuthiana's backstory in the book feel specific to India, the scope gets a little broader in the film. And the pretty unanimous response I got was that it was definitely yikes, but too garbled and unspecific to be actively offensive. It's just weird. And weirder still because while there are traditions surrounding baby teeth around the world, the tooth fairy is a purely Western concept. So making tooth Asian inspired really is 10 kinds of strange. And that strangeness did leak into the film, where they kept Tuthiana's vaguely Asian roots and expanded on them. Head of story Hamish Greaves said in the art book, Tooth is a half-human, half-hummingbird creature, but she could very well be one of the fantastical human forms found in Eastern mythology. Production designer Patrick Hannenberger states that their take on the Tooth Fairy was inspired by the half-bird, half-human gods of ancient Buddhist and Hindu cultures. You can see half-avian/half-human characters like Tooth in Thai mythology, where they are called Kinaris. The inspiration for the overall concept of the Tooth Palace came from a trip Hannenberger took to Thailand in the spring of 2008. I was struck by the bird's nest climbers who venture daily inside the caves along southwest Thailand, he says. But the art book also states that the Tooth Palace is tucked away deep inside a mountain range that is reminiscent of China's Huangshan Mountains. The art book also states that in the imagery and glyphs around the Tooth Palace there are hints at Tooth's parentage, with some images hinting at a romantic love between an Indian Maharaja and a magical bird. So they did draw a lot on the source material, clearly trying to make something a bit more based on real cultural elements. They nixed the ship made of human teeth, thank God. But also, after all that, Tuthiana is, well, white-ish. There were actually discussions back when this movie came out about Tuthiana being whitewashed given her backstory. Her book was the one released on October 2nd, 2012, about a month before the film came out. And what's frustrating is that the creative team were clearly debating how to handle Tooth's ethnicity. There was a lot of gorgeous concept art of a Tuthiana who was clearly more inspired by her South and Southeast Asian roots. They even debated what color to make her skin. We experimented with a variety of colors and shapes, notes Hannenberger. We couldn't make her skin too bluish or greenish and had to keep the human elements. Yellow would be too much like a canary, while blue would remind viewers of Mystique or the Na'vi, and magenta was too otherworldly. But apparently, when they decided to give her human skin, they kept it white and just stepped away from making her look too human, instead going in a more bird-like direction. And of the people I spoke to, about half wishes they had kept to these earlier designs, while half doesn't mind because she's so far removed from being human in her final iteration. But everybody agrees, Book Tooth is weird as shit. There is also a little weirdness in the film version only, because Book Bunny was a stuffy scholar type, but casting Hugh Jackman led them to this more warrior-like, distinctly Australian bunny.
No, the kangaroo's right.
And the art book makes several references to the indigenous cultures of Australia in inspirations for Bunny's design. For example, Patrick Hannenberger said they added some tribal motif patterns on his body to emphasize this general timeless aura about him so that you can believe that this bunny is a guardian that has been around forever. A lot of these details might not immediately come across in the final film, so I'm not really going to weigh in on if this sucks or not. Indigenous people of Australia, please feel free to weigh in the comments section. From where I'm standing as an outsider, I think it seems kinda sus. Also, while William Joyce isn't actively a part of any hate groups, a low bar for fantasy authors I know, but listen, he made it. But he does like to post on Instagram, and while a lot of it is, as previously stated, puppies with jetpacks, which I love, some of it is his personal headcanons about various story elements. A lot of that is harmless, but occasionally you get some really weird shit, like real-life woman Isadora Duncan, who was a real person who existed, who, according to Joyce, was at one point so in love with Jack Frost, she threatened to throw herself into a volcano if he didn't marry her, which is weird. And then there's the weird stuff like saying Jack's magical staff Twiner is made from wood from a Mohican burial ground. Just weird, unnecessary shit like that, which doesn't seem particularly well thought out or researched with any amount of sensitivity. Thankfully, that shit isn't in the movie, but it is a thing that exists on the internet for reasons that baffle me. So now, let's talk about...
What makes you think I want to be a guardian?
Of course you do.
After we meet Jack in that opening sequence, the movie very efficiently introduces us to our heroes and our villain. First, we meet North in his workshop at the North Pole, where, by the way, he is listening to the Firebird Suite by Igor Stravinsky, another Russian composer. Just great touch. We also meet his helpers, the Yetis.
Painted red!
We also meet his not-so-helpful helpers, the Elves.
Very nice. Keep up good work.
The Elves are like if Minions were funny. I know DreamWorks was definitely trying to capitalize on the Minions trend with these guys, but the Elves actually make me laugh. Also, concept artist Gabe Hordos describes them as such. Imagine if a rat wanted to help you, he says. He would get in your way and mess things up, although his intentions might be good. Incredible. And almost immediately after that, we get our first hint of the villain, the boogeyman, Pitch Black, when a shadow of him appears at the North Pole. It's a really cool bit, and because of that, North knows something is afoot and summons the other Guardians using the Northern Lights! God, I love this movie. From there, we get quick sequences of Bunny, Tooth, and Sandy in their elements. We see that Bunny is cool and Australian.
Oh, it's freezing.
Tooth has ADHD, and Sandy is just adorable, and I love everything he does. Once they convene at the North Pole, we get to see them all interacting as Santa explains that something is up.
I feel it. In my belly.
Finally, the Man in the Moon tells the Guardians that Pitch is back and they need a new Guardian.
I wonder who it's gonna be.
Please not the Groundhog, please not the Groundhog.
And the Moon tells them that the new member they need for their team, the one who must be their new Guardian, is...
Jack Frost.
So for anybody who knows me in real life or has heard about how I relate to the Grinch on an almost spiritual level, then you might know that I hate Christmas movies.
That was...
The stranglehold that Christmas has on our culture is hell.
Merry Crisis!
It annoys the crap out of me when stores start playing Christmas carols on November 1st and everything is red and green in Christmas, but some people like to say that a war on Christmas exists. Meanwhile, Hanukkah gets a pity end cap at Target and one entire Adam Sandler movie that I hate, but I'm not bitter or anything. Basically, I avoid Christmas movies. I haven't seen Miracle on 34th Street or White Christmas or A Christmas Story. Why should I? These movies are peddling a holiday that I don't celebrate as a universal experience. For years, I avoided Nightmare Before Christmas because it had Christmas and Nightmare in the title, and I didn't like either of those things. So when I say I like a movie that stars the Santa Man himself, this is... well, for me, it's kind of exceptional, I guess. What I find appealing is that religion is largely removed from both Easter and Christmas in these movies. There is nary a mention of Mr. J. Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny are only shown in relation to the basic iconography you could see at a Hallmark store. Easter has eggs and bunnies, and Santa Claus has elves, a sleigh, trees with lights on them, just the basics. And better still, the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus are placed at the same level as folkloric figures like the Sandman, the Tooth Fairy, and Jack Frost. Although Bunny and North may bicker about whose holiday is more important, it is very removed from any sort of religious iconography. It's just painted eggs and candy canes. I understand that this might not be an element of the film that appeals to everybody, but it certainly made the movie more fun for me. So now let's talk about animation. Now, I am not an expert in CG animation. A lot of my information on this comes from the art book and the behind the scenes, but it is an interesting process to be sure. The art book actually features a somewhat wild-looking flowchart for the animation process, but in basic terms, it starts the way all animation starts, with storyboarding and the scripting process, as well as concept artists finalizing designs for characters and settings. Beneath all their flourishes and details, the designs for each of the Guardians and their realms are rooted in simple shapes and colors. North is square and red, Bunny is a green triangle, Sandy is a yellow circle, and Tooth is a pink diamond. So once you've got your concept art, your storyboards, your script, we move on to modeling, which is basically sculpting everything in the 3D space, and rigging, which is what makes things move in said 3D space. Character supervisor Arthur Gregory says, the primary task of a character technical direction team is to provide animation with a digital puppet for a 3D model so that it can be posed into any action or emotion. Apparently, Toothiana's rigging was quite complex, since on top of the usual facial and body setup, there were all of her tail and head feathers as well as her wings. Her tail alone apparently required 5 separate systems, plus 2 extra ones called fancy feathers. That all had to work in a layered animation system. Surfacing is another important aspect here, and the name is pretty self-explanatory. It's adding layers of detail and texture on the surface of everything. An important aspect in creating texture is how all of these individual surfaces react to light. For example, the texture of Sandy was described as being like marzipan, while the texture of Pitch was almost satiny, apparently inspired by the underbelly of manta rays. Then, as the editorial department is continuing to nail down the story, I'm fairly sure this is when all the actors record their voiceovers, but that's some guesswork on my end. And as that part goes on, the animation department starts the rough layout of things like simulations for how North's sleigh will fly, or how Pitch's nightmares navigate a space, basically focusing on how characters are going to move around and be placed within an area. Damon Obame, who was the head of layout, said, "The irony of working in layout is that all of the simulations work with real properties of physics, but what looks really good on camera is actually 10 times faster than reality, so North's sleigh ended up flying 300 to 400 miles an hour. Then there are the crowd effects, managing all the secondary characters, thousands of Tooth's baby teeth fairies and all the nightmares and Bunny's little eggs, all the Yetis and the elves, and any group of background characters had to have a variety of animation cycles made for them. The matte painting department works to further finalize and flesh out backgrounds in every scene, and the character effects department works on various special effects for each individual character, like North's beard, Bunny's fur, or Tooth's translucent wings. There's also a visual effects department that came up with things like the look of Sandy's dream sand and the look of Pitch's twist on it with the nightmare sand, which compared to the soft, sort of sugary way the dream sand moves, the nightmare sand has an almost oily motion to it. They also designed the effect for, well, Jack's Frost, which rides a line between the fractal effect of snowflakes as well as that of lightning bolts. Then the lighting team comes in to, well, do the lighting. The lighting team's job is to pull all these different elements together so that it can move on to get scored and sound designed and color graded. Of course, it's not a straight A to Z process, but a cyclical one where teams continually go in and rework and retool things as departments continue to refine their work over the course of making the film. Production supervisor Kara Orapayo said there was a spirit of collaboration on the film that the Guardians themselves would approve of. Everybody came to this film wanting to make it the best that they could make it, and they went out of their way to make it happen. It was all about what's best for the movie. One of the little details that I'm particularly fond of is the specific physicality brought to each of our characters, something that was entirely built from the ground up by all of these digital artists. Tooth and her baby tooth fairies move like hummingbirds, Sandy floats around like a cloud, and Jack flies around with an athletic sort of grace. Animators apparently took inspiration for his physicality from seeing kids skateboarding, which I love. It's a little thing, but it's so distinct. I love watching Jack fly around the town of Burgess, which is where he meets Jamie.
Oh, that looks interesting. It's a good book.
When we catch up with Jack in the present day, he's being a chaotic little scamp and ends up sending this child on a wild ride that ends like this.
Whoops.
Cool, a tooth! Tooth fairy.
Oh, no. Oh.
Jack is still lonely and bereft and frustrated at being ignored.
What's the guy got to do to get a little attention around here?
And I love the scene where he monologues to the man in the moon asking why he's been put here like this with no memory of his life before he was Jack Frost, unable to be seen by anybody except the Guardians who mostly ignore him. That is, until they kidnap him and drag him to the North Pole.
I love being shoved in a sack and tossed through a magic portal.
Oh, good. That was my idea.
It's around here that we get our first real glimpse of Pitch Black. He comes into the room of a child having a dream about a unicorn, and Pitch is able to twist her dream into a nightmare.
My nightmares are finally ready. Are your guardians?
Meanwhile, Jack's been brought to the North Pole to be made a guardian, and here's where the movie explains some rules. In order to exist and be seen by humans, they need to be believed in, essentially. The more kids believe in them, the more powerful they are. This globe tracks all of the children who believe and all the children the Guardians are supposed to protect. But if children stop believing, the Guardians lose their power and eventually they could even cease to exist. And Jack doesn't even want to be a Guardian.
To spend eternity like you guys, cooped up in some hideout thinking of new ways to bribe kids? That's not for me. No offense.
Jack and Bunny have this argument.
The kangaroo's right.
I'm not a kangaroo, mate. I'm a bunny. The Easter bunny. People believe in me.
And North takes Jack aside for a little chat. On the way, we meet Phil the Yeti, who Jack apparently knows by name, since apparently he's been trying to sneak into the North Pole for years.
What do you mean, busted?
Oh, don't worry. I never got past the Yetis. Oh, hey, Phil.
When they reach North's workshop, Jack gets offered some fruitcake, and then
Now we get down to tax of breasts.
North wants to know what is Jack's center. All of the Guardians have one, he explains. He has a series of Russian nesting dolls to illustrate his many layers until we see North's center is...
There's a tiny wooden baby.
No, that's not it. It's wonder. North is all about bringing wonder to children. That is his center, and Jack needs to figure out what he has to offer the Guardians. North even gives him the littlest nesting doll as some kind of reminder and encouragement, and it's a really lovely sequence. But all of that gets cut short when there's trouble at Tooth's palace. We get a great sleigh ride sequence to get there.
Everyone loves the sleigh.
It's really fun and should have been a ride at Universal or something. And then at Tooth's palace, we see what Pitch is up to.
They're taking the tooth fairy!
Pitch is capturing all of Toothiana's fairies, although Jack is able to save one.
Hey, little baby Tooth, you okay?
Then the five of them face off against Pitch, who explains that he wants what they have.
To be believed in.
He's tired of being trapped under children's beds. He wants to be seen, just like Jack. But eventually Pitch vanishes, and the Guardians are panicking as children are beginning to stop believing in the Tooth Fairy. Without her helpers, she can't keep up with children losing their baby teeth, and the disappointment is putting out lights all across the globe. We also learn that Tooth protects children's memories, which are stored in their baby teeth. I know that's really weird. When children need to be reminded of what's important, that's what she does. And she apparently had Jack's memories too. The memories from when Jack was human. The memories that might explain why Jack is here and what his life was like before. But Pitch has them now.
And we have to get them back!
And the whole thing is taking its toll on Tooth.
Oh no.
Until North has the idea for them to collect all of the teeth.
You know how many toys I deliver in one night?
And eggs I hide in one day.
So the gang all agree to help, and we have another incredible, adorably fun sequence with all the Guardians trying to one-up each other. It's just great. At the end of the night, Tooth and Jack end up in Jamie's room to pick up a tooth lost in a freak sledding accident.
Kids, huh?
Eventually, the other Guardians barge in and wake up Jamie, and we get a reminder that he can't see Jack, and it's heartbreaking.
He can see us?
Most of us.
But the Guardians don't really know what to do with an actual awake kid, so...
Sandy, knock him out. With the dream, Sandy, Gumby.
What was Sandy gonna do? But anyway, the whole thing goes awry, and Sandy accidentally knocks out all the Guardians except Jack. Then the pair of them chase after a nightmare and end up facing Pitch.
Remind me not to get on your bad side.
Initially, it looks like they're handling things until...
It was stupid of me to mess with your dreams. So, I'll tell you what. You can have them back.
And then there's this amazing, really cool fight sequence that has a lot of little beats that I love, but it ends tragically when Pitch takes out Sandy.
No.
And Jack is the first one who can successfully lash back out at Pitch, but he wasn't able to do it in time to save his friend. When talking about Rise of the Guardians, one has to talk about how this movie was received. Because on the one hand, there was a rabid Tumblr fanbase that loved Jack Frost and a few other recent animated films to the point that a popular crossover began called Rise of the Brave Tangled Dragons. Yes, this is real. It was mostly about watching these 4 adorable teens interacting in various alternate universes and a lot of shipping. I wasn't super active in this fandom, but I saw the appeal of shipping Hiccup from How to Train Your Dragon and Merida from Brave, and I thought some of the gift sets and edits were pretty cute. The following year, Frozen came out, and fans started shipping Jack and Elsa because ice powers. The ship name was Jelsa, and it was popular enough that William Joyce is aware of this and has said this on the subject.
The biggest fan base of all of the people who worship Elsa from Frozen desperately want Jack Frost and Elsa to get together.
I want that.
I do too. And they call it Jelsa.
If you want a deeper dive on the Tumblr side of things, Izzy Is actually came out with a whole video about it while I was making this essay. I'll leave a link to that in the description. But while teenagers and 20-somethings on Tumblr latched onto this movie with a vengeance, it did kind of badly at the box office. With a budget of $145 million and a total box office return of $306.9 million, despite making back the cost of the film and another $150 million, it was the lowest opening weekend since Flushed Away, and DreamWorks ended up touting an $83 million loss due to production and marketing costs. This led to a company-wide restructuring and the firing of around 350 employees. Now, I'm not a money person, but I'm pretty sure Jeffrey Katzenberg could have just taken a pay cut and not fired all those people who had worked their asses off, but whatever. Numbers aside, I do think it's interesting to look into why this movie did so poorly despite a rabid fan base and, by all accounts, massive plans for a long-running franchise. And I think it comes down to audience expectations. Because it's not a failure of marketing per se. I think they very smartly advertised the action elements in the trailers, but you can still see some of these scarier sequences. The movie was rated PG, but I think parents saw a movie with Santa Claus that looked too scary for their 3-year-olds, and that was that. What's absolutely maddening is that parents took children to see the Avengers movie that same year, but for some reason animation has to either be super adult like Sausage Party or for 3-year-olds like Paw Patrol. I think Rise of the Guardians would have hit really well with that 7 to 13-year-old demographic that the books were aimed at. It depends on the kid, mind you. I probably wouldn't have been able to handle this movie until I was around 11, and some of the sequences are genuinely scary. But I think this movie would have been a hit with preteens who unfortunately don't usually have the disposable income to go see movies and are generally reliant on their parents for that sort of thing. I do suspect that it's parents who saw a movie with this and didn't take their little kids, and then those same parents saw a movie with Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and thought the movie was probably too immature for their older kids. So while the movie succeeded enough to garner a following, it didn't succeed enough to generate box office returns. But it did do really well on home video, although that wasn't enough to get people their jobs back or revive the franchise. I'll be honest, personally I'm more sad for the people losing their jobs than I am for the lack of an entire franchise. Given the diminishing returns of the How to Train Your Dragon franchise, I'm perfectly happy to enjoy this singular excellent film. But that's just me. But speaking of how this movie's audience is difficult to pin down, this is a movie that does not pull its punches. The death of Sandy at the hands of Pitch is a scene that would absolutely make little kids cry, because this movie does not screw around. After Sandy's death, we get an honest-to-God funeral sequence that wrecks me. Although, full disclosure, I think the elves mournfully ringing their little hat bells is unintentionally hilarious. But after that, Jack and North have a conversation where Jack regrets not doing more to save Sandy, and North tries to comfort him, saying he did more than any of them were able to do against Pitch.
I don't know who you were in your past life, but in this life you are a guardian.
How can I know who I am till I find out who I was?
And North says he'll figure it out.
I feel it. In my belly.
And it's here that we get to the Easter sequence. As lights are going off across the globe, Bunny is like,
We can still turn this around. Easter is tomorrow. I say we pull out all the stops and we get those little lights flickering again.
So they go to Bunny's warren for an absolutely bonkers sequence with these tiny little walking eggs.
That's a little strange. Nah, mate. That's adorable.
I love how weird this is. Also, Jamie's sister Sophie accidentally ended up at the warren, and it's here we learn the Guardians are kind of out of touch when it comes to kids.
We are very busy bringing joy to children. We don't have time. For children?
But with a little encouragement from Jack, everybody ends up having a great day prepping all the eggs and stuff. By the end of the day, Bunny and Jack have reached a bit of mutual respect and maybe even friendship.
Look, I'm sorry about the whole, the kangaroo thing.
It's the accent, isn't it?
And it's adorable. When it's time to get Sophie home, Jack volunteers to take her. Everybody's like, what if Pitch does something? But Jack says not to worry.
I'll be quick as a bunny.
And I do have to quick shout out the utterly charming big brother energy Jack is serving in this sequence as he puts Sophie to bed. But on the way back, Jack hears a voice calling his name, and despite Baby Tooth being like,
Don't worry, there's still time.
Jack follows the voice to Pitch's lair, which is underneath a really creepy bed in the forest. This movie is perfect and also would have scared me senseless as a kid. But in Pitch's lair, we see all the baby teeth fairies and also, God, this is an upsetting sequence. All the baby teeth Pitch stole are there too, and it's here where Pitch shows up to tempt Jack with his lost memories.
You make a mess wherever you go, while you're doing it right now.
He preys on Jack's insecurities and torments him long enough that when Jack finds his way back, it's too late.
They don't see me. They don't see me.
So when Jack shows up with his memories and Baby Tooth gone, the Guardians immediately jump to the worst conclusion.
You were with Pitch?
We should never have trusted you.
And Jack responds in kind, throwing Santa's little nesting doll into the dirt and flying away. He ends up alone in Antarctica where Pitch finds him.
I thought this might happen.
He tries appealing to Jack because they both just want to be seen and believed in. He tries to prey on Jack's loneliness and suggests that they work together.
What goes together better than cold and dark?
But Jack isn't having it, and in a moment that is fascinating to me, I think to some degree, Pitch is genuinely hurt to be turned down. So he turns to threats and cruelty. He's got Baby Tooth, and he says he'll give her to Jack in exchange for his staff.
You have a bad habit of interfering.
And when Jack gives it to him...
All right, now let her go.
No.
Pitch breaks the staff and throws the pair of them in a hole. And I really do think Pitch is one of the more interesting villains I've seen in a children's film. I suspect his intensity is a big part of what scared away family audiences, preventing the movie's success. But I think he's a great character. And I'm saying this as somebody who mostly views villains as a vehicle to make the story go. Like, if they're well written, cool, but if they're Idris Elba in Star Trek Beyond or Guy Pearce in Iron Man 3, that doesn't really lessen my viewing experience. But Pitch is so interesting because what makes him evil in the eyes of the Guardians is just inherent to who he is. Pitch loves scaring children. He loves darkness. These are antithetical to the good guys, but it makes Pitch almost sympathetic because, in his own way, he wants to be accepted for who he is. He wants to be seen and believed in. I mean, sure, he's also a manipulative jerk, but there's more going on than just a big scary dude. In the words of Frankenstein's monster, if I cannot inspire love, I will cause fear. But that complexity was maybe lost on audiences who wanted to take their little kids to see a movie with Santa Claus in it. At this point in the film, Jack is at his lowest, lying at the bottom of a ravine, his staff in pieces. He's all alone except for little Baby Tooth, who he tries to protect from the cold, but...
Sorry. All I can do is keep you cold.
I haven't talked about the relationship between Jack and Baby Tooth, but it is genuinely one of my favorite bits of the film. As Jack despairs, she climbs into the pocket of his jacket. At first we assume it's to keep warm, but then she comes back out with Jack's memories. The memories he got from Pitch, and in a beautiful bit of nonverbal animation, she gently encourages Jack, telling him it's okay to see the memories he's been searching for this whole time. And so we all get to see that Jack was once a regular boy. He had a family and a sister. One day the pair of them were out on the ice, and it was cracking. His sister was about to fall in, and so he did his best to save her.
You're gonna be all right. You're not gonna fall in. We're gonna have a little fun instead.
And in the process of saving her, Jack fell in the freezing water and drowned. Which is a really dark beat in the middle of this adorable little movie. This movie does not pull its punches, I swear to God! But it seems that in the moment Jack saved his sister, the man in the moon saw his heroic deed and decided he was a guardian. And when Jack wakes up from his memories, he's ecstatic.
I had a family, I had a sister, I saved her!
With his newfound confidence, he picks up the pieces of his staff and tries to repair it. Initially, he's just mashing the pieces of wood together, but when he closes his eyes and believes, his staff reforms and he's able to fly away to try and save the day. Meanwhile, Pitch, at the height of his victory, comes to the North Pole to gloat. It's amazing, some of his moves are inspired by Fred Astaire, and he relishes as lights of little children's belief are going out across the globe.
4, 3, 2...
All except for one. Meanwhile, Jack returns to Pitch's lair and his globe and sees that same little light and knows instantly.
Jamie.
Jamie sits alone in his bedroom, staring at a stuffed rabbit. He's at an impasse. All of his friends have stopped believing in the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus, but Jamie still wants to believe.
So you kind of owe me now.
Jack Frost comes through the boy's window and hears as he asks for some kind of sign that the Easter Bunny is real. And Jack makes a rabbit out of frost and animates it running around the room. And when it bursts into a flurry of snow, Jamie, in a moment of pure magic, says,
Snow? Jack Frost.
He turns and sees Jack, who is still in shock that this boy said his name.
Wait, can you hear me? Can you see me?
I love this scene so much. I can never watch it without smiling.
He sees me!
Jack's joy at just being seen is infectious, and their collective excitement over Jack making it snow in Jamie's room is so sweet.
You just made it snow!
I know!
In my room!
I know!
And Jack assures him that Santa and the Tooth Fairy and the Easter Bunny are all real, right as the Guardians arrive. But all of them are thoroughly weakened by all the children who no longer believe in them. Bunny was apparently hit hardest by it all.
That's the Easter Bunny?
Now somebody sees me. I mean, where were you about an hour ago, mate?
And that's when Pitch shows up, gleefully telling them that they look awful. Jack tries to fight him, but he's too powerful now. He corners the 5 of them in an alley, and Jamie tells Jack that he's scared. And it's right then that Jack remembers how he saved his sister.
We're gonna have a little fun instead.
And so Jack interrupts Pitch's villain monologue with a snowball, and then the Guardians go and get all of Jamie's friends to help them out. It's really adorable as they go sledding down the streets telling children Happy Easter and don't forget to floss. One by one, all of Jamie's friends start believing again, and not just in the Guardians, but Jack Frost as well.
Is that Jack Frost?
Once they're all together, the Guardians say they'll protect the children, but
You think a few children can help you against this? But who'll protect you?
and it's Jamie who steps forward and says he'll protect the Guardians.
I will.
And one by one, the other children step forward as well.
I will.
And me. I'll try.
As a wave of darkness and Pitch's nightmares bear down on them, Jamie says,
I do believe in you. I'm just not afraid of you.
and that is enough to stop the dark tide. Everything turns into that golden sand we saw before. Suddenly, Pitch's power is undone by children just not being scared of him. Suddenly, the Guardians' power returns to them, and with the help of the children, they fight back the nightmares. And Sandy comes back from the dead.
Sandman.
Look, I know it's not that surprising that a character in a children's film did not stay dead, but Sandy's death scene did not pull punches, so I'm glad Sandy's back. The children just start having fun, they start a snowball fight, it's great.
Oh. You're all on naughty list. Bunny, think fast.
Jack tells North that he found his center. It's fun. And with the children no longer fearing him, Pitch is invisible to them again, and while this is a victory, it's not entirely one that the Guardians can enjoy. They corner Pitch on a frozen lake, which, by the way, according to the art book, is the lake that Jack died in. I cannot even believe this movie sometimes. Also, it's a subtle thing, but this is the first time that we see Pitch in daylight, where there are no shadows for him to hide in, and when he's at his weakest point. And it's here that Pitch tries to turn the tables on them, but all the nightmares that have gathered around them aren't their nightmares because they're not afraid. And in a sequence that is sure to give children nightmares, the shades converge on Pitch, dragging him down into a hole in the ground and presumably to his death. And with Pitch gone and Jack having learned his center, it's time to officially induct him as one of the Guardians. The oath he takes is the one taken directly from William Joyce's books.
Will you, Jack Frost, vow to watch over the children of the world, to guard them with your life, their hopes, their wishes, and their dreams?
I will.
And then it's time to say goodbye. Jamie worries about what might happen if he stops believing again, and Jack tells him that they will always be with him, and in a way, that makes him a guardian too. Jamie gives him a hug, and it's the cutest thing. After that final farewell, North's sleigh takes flight, and a voiceover from Jack tells us,
My name is Jack Frost, and I'm a guardian.
and he says if the moon tells you something,
Believe it.
and that's the movie. There's also a really cute post-credit sequence of all the children being put to bed by the Yetis and the Tooth Fairies and the elves. It's great. But yeah, that's the movie. And I love the message about finding your center, which is something that I do think is applicable to us in the real world. I think it's a little empowering to take a moment and look inward and consider what we have to offer the world. Whether it's stories or art or just friendship and a non-judgmental ear. It might not be as straightforward as fun or wonder, but everybody has something to offer. And even more than that, I love what this movie says about magic and belief. And, well, okay. So you know that scene in Peter Pan where Tinkerbell ends up drinking poison to save Peter? When it was originally performed on stage, the actress playing Peter Pan, Nina Bosco, would run to the edge of the stage and appeal to the audience. If you believe in fairies, clap your hands. J.M. Barrie was concerned that an audience of mostly adults wouldn't clap to save Tinkerbell. He had actually instructed the orchestra to put down their instruments and clap if the audience didn't respond, but he needn't have worried, because when Nina asked the audience to believe in fairies and clap their hands, the uproarious applause was so surprising the actress burst into tears. You see, everybody wants to believe in magic. When I was a child, I had imaginary fairy friends and pretended with my best friend that we were mermaids seeking potion under the ocean. But when we grow up and our rational minds gain a better understanding of how the world works, we're expected to put magic aside. And maybe as an adult, I don't personally expect to find a fairy in my garden, but that doesn't mean that magic doesn't exist. It's just a different kind of magic. I may understand what makes the sun rise or the wind blow, but that doesn't make it any less magical to watch a sunrise or go outside and feel the wind on your face. In Neil Gaiman's American Gods, the protagonist Shadow Moon gives a long speech about all the things he believes in. I can believe things that are true and things that aren't true, and I can believe things where nobody knows if they're true or not. I believe that mankind's destiny lies in the stars. I believe that candy really did taste better when I was a kid. That it's aerodynamically impossible for a bumblebee to fly, that light is a wave and a particle, that there's a cat in a box somewhere who's alive and dead at the same time, although if they don't ever open the box to feed it, it'll eventually just be two different kinds of dead, and that there are stars in the universe billions of years older than the universe itself. And Jeanette Winterson once wrote, "What is it that you contain? The dead, time, light patterns of millennia opening in your gut. Every minute in each of you, a few million potassium atoms succumb to radioactive decay. The energy that powers these tiny atomic events has been locked inside potassium atoms ever since a star-sized bomb exploded nothing into being. Potassium, like uranium and radium, is the long-lived radioactive nuclear waste of the supernova bang that accounts for you. Your first parent was a star. There is magic in you. It might not be the kind that involves a wand and saying abracadabra, but every scientific thing we understand can still be magical even while we grasp how it works. There is magic in the stars and the trees and the neurons firing that keep our lungs pumping and our hearts beating. It's mundane and explainable and rational and magical." So, it's ridiculous this video took as long to make as it did, but between my mic dying halfway through editing and a bunch of other stuff, it just took a while. I am working on my next essay now, so don't you worry. Thank you, as always, to patrons who are sticking around even though I've got a day job now and it's making these videos take a little longer. I appreciate you. So, that's all for now. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.